All right, we got to do it. We're going to start on a sour note. We don't have to harp on them, but we got to go through them. The guys who are stock downs, we're going to go to first, and then we're going to end on the positive note. But who you got? Who's your first guy that you've been disappointed with through the first 2 days?
Emory Jones, the right tackle, who's actually played some guard at Senior Bowl too, from LSU.
Yep.
The thing about him going into the season, he was considered probably a top 15, top 20 pick. And
Yes.
he's had some struggles. And a lot of people were surprised. I was actually talking to some scouts and some front office people that he came out. A lot of people thought he would potentially maybe go back and really, work on his craft and become a little bit better and more ready to go into the NFL. But I think he just looked at the landscape of the offensive tackle position and said, well, this is, a class where I could maybe sneak into the back of the first or second, but he really hasn't helped himself. He's really struggled when it comes to speed to power. He's really struggled in at guard at times as well. Now, I will say he did look a little bit better in the competition period. I believe it was best out of 3, and he kind of maybe won 2 of those yesterday. But overall, I think he hasn't had the performance that he would have liked coming into the Senior Bowl, where he had a great opportunity to kind of kill the noise when it came to him. I don't think he's killed the noise. I think people are still going to continue to talk about some of his shortcomings when it comes to his pass protection, him being able to anchor in on speed to power as well.
Yeah, I wasn't super high on him coming in, but I obviously recognize the talent that you said when coming into the season. Like, the guy is physically gifted. He is built the way you put together an offensive lineman. And even one of the reps in the team drills where going up against Shamar Stewart, he just doesn't get deep enough on a normal drop back pass set, just lets him walk around him like to the top of the pocket. It's like elementary day one offensive tackle play stuff to be making those mistakes in the Senior Bowl. It's just like, it's not to say that he'll never figure it out, but when a guy is that big of a project who's played already this much, you can't start him right away. And it's like, when are you going to start him and where are you going to start him? So I think ideally, I think he has the talent and like physical capabilities to play tackle, but just seeing stuff like that, I'm like, he might have to be a guard at the next level.
Yeah.
And I doubt he's a first or second rounder at this point, even with those physical tools. Just hard to go to bat for him, unfortunately. All right, my first one, stock down, and this kills me because I think this guy is so talented. It's Kentucky defensive tackle Deone Walker. Was the talk of the weigh-ins when he came in at 6'7" and a quarter inch. By my database, that's the tallest defensive tackle ever measured pre-draft process since the year 2000, since we started like keeping those things for real. But man, he cannot play low, dude. If you've seen this guy play, he is so, for a guy 6'7", 340 pounds, he moves incredibly well. The guy his feet are so good. And you see a guy who's so athletically gifted at that size. It's like, wow, he has to be good, right? And coming into this year, a lot of people had him as a top 10 player in the class because he had like over 50 pressures as a sophomore at Kentucky.
Correct.
And on tape, he played way too many snaps for a guy that size. He was worn down in so many games, and that was part of the problem. But you shouldn't be worn down in these. And if you're not putting your best foot forward and not able to, dominate FCS guards and the competition he's been going up against, because it's not a great interior offensive line class here at the Senior Bowl, I'm worried. And especially in the run game, he just cannot play low enough. He cannot hold up to double teams. At that size, you're thinking like, 340, that's a nose tackle. No, I would not want this guy at nose tackle whatsoever in my NFL defense, because he will not hold the point against doubles, maybe one-on-one, but I did not see the consistent ability to sink and drive at that size. And it's like, well, what is he then? Can he drop down and play edge? Because that's a body type that, 6'7" guys, more often than not, that's where they end up. They're like, taller guys can play the edge, and it's not as big a deal because, again, you don't see double teams. You're more one-on-one. You're playing more in space. You can get that first touch advantage. But that's like, he's like 70 pounds away from even trying that. So I don't know what to do with him, but I do know that the first couple of days of practice, he did not impress whatsoever.
I thought he had a better day yesterday. I thought he flashed in some team periods. And to your point, I don't think, even though he's built at 6'7", 340, he's not built like a traditional 3-4 nose tackle. That's the thing. He's an athletic guy. Like, he can get up the field. So, honestly, I would put him in the 4-3 at nose. I wouldn't put him in the 3-4 at nose. Because that was what I think he's on the American side, if I'm not mistaken, maybe on the national side. But that's the scheme that they've been running, and he's actually had some success in team periods, getting on the edges of nose tackles. Like, it's hard to block him one-on-one. You talked about his size being the issue. I saw a playing team yesterday where he actually came out with he had his knees bended, and he actually had good pad level. And then we call it the double bag drill, right? Where and they do this in the combine, where you hump one bag, then you hump the other one. You saw him flip his hips. You see the athletic ability, and he got back off it. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm talking about. I think the biggest thing with him too, Mike, is a mindset. Like, when he goes, he's almost impossible to block. But there's not enough consistency of it. And I think that's one thing that scouts are worried about. Like, what's his why? What's his temperament? Because he should dominate play in and play out. You talked about it being 6'7", 340 pounds. You talked about his pass rush ability for somebody that size. He's a freak athletic defensive tackle. Cam Jackson also is brightened my eyes as well. I actually had the pleasure of calling him a couple of his games when he was at Memphis before he transferred to Florida. So I knew what skill set he had. He's one of those big dancing bears as well. And he's actually looked a little bit better than Walker throughout the Senior Bowl as well. Similar builds and everything. But going back to Walker, I just think for a lot of scouts and front office people, it's going to be his temperament and his mindset. Like, why can't we get this guy to go every single play?
Yeah, and only 20 years old, though. I mean, guy's super young.
Very young, yeah.
So there's potential there. Tell me what you think about this, because I see that body type. I see his ability to move. Why doesn't this guy play offensive tackle? I mean, like, I know it's crazy like to think about, but like,
definitely crazy to think about.
He is tailor-made. I mean, that is a build that the high-end offensive tackles in the NFL, that's what they look like. I mean, that is a guy who is built to play offensive tackle. I know back in the day, Eric Armstead was a guy that people wanted to play offensive tackle back at Oregon when he was coming out as a recruit. Just because when you are those big, tall defensive ends, it takes a special dude to be able to hold up on the interior. And we've seen Eric Armstead even throughout his career probably do work on both the outside and the inside. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm curious if
that'd be wishful
doesn't
thinking,
work out.
Man, I wonder if he played it in high school at all.
Yeah,
you're right, body type wise. But like I said, I think this dude is just he's a different breed. He kind of fits into that DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead guys that are 6'7" plus, but are freakishly athletic, right? Because he can bend and get on the edge for a guy that big. I'm talking about in the interior as well.
Yes.
So again, I don't think you traditionally, he wouldn't be good on the Baltimore Ravens, right? As a Travis Jones guy or Michael Pierce guy, but you go to a 4-3 and you let him wear out that center one-on-one. I think that's where his future looks like. And again, to me, it's all about temperament and mindset for him.
All right, who's your next one?
My next guy for stock down, and this is a tough one because I was a big fan of this guy going into the season, Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And again, we knew there would be some struggles for all these quarterbacks. We saw so many balls on the ground with quarterbacks in exchange because none of these guys have taken snaps under center, right? Yeah. All these guys are in the shotgun. And we saw that with Jalen Milroe. Just some of his footwork just has not improved. And I was hoping in the short time since Bama, didn't get to the college football playoffs that maybe he would have been working with a coach. He just seemed like his footwork was all over the place at times, right? And then the biggest thing for him, we know he can throw a pretty deep ball. It's the singles and the doubles, right? The intermediate short passes. The accuracy still isn't there. And I remember a play vividly. I think Oben, defensive end from Notre Dame, wins on the edge, right? But as a quarterback, you still finish the play, right? And he ends up throwing a short crosser right to Kaiser. So it was like Notre Dame on Notre Dame crime versus Jalen Milroe on that play. And it gets picked off by Kaiser and goes the other way for 6. So some of the things that I thought I would, hopefully see him improve in, I haven't really seen. And supposedly there's been chatter that he's going to work with Jordan Palmer after this, which would be good for him for sure. But again, it's like, where do you draft him? Because I think Louis Riddick said it perfectly. Like, he's a project. Do not draft him if you expect him to play right away, because it's going to be a failed experiment. This is a guy that you're going to have to realize it's going to take some time with him. But he has a specific skill set that can be explosive with his ability not only to run the football, but to throw it down the field, right? It's all about the singles and doubles, because that's how you win in the NFL, the singles and doubles, right? The home run passes are great, But to consistently win and drive the ball down the field, you got to have the singles and doubles, and that's where he really struggles.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with me is I don't know if that improves because his hands are tiny. I mean, I think a lot of the issues, and I see it, the reason I was so wary of him just on his tape is that his ball placement on screens, should be layups, right? He should be putting those in receivers on the helmet every time or like in a good spot. His ball placement on screens is just haphazard. And I think it's because of that ball handling. When you have 8 3/4 inch hands, and we did this with Kenny Pickett, right? It's difficult to spin it correctly every time. It's just difficult to handle an NFL football. It truly is. And so I worry that with that going against them, I don't know if it ever gets fixed, right? I think it might just be a product of that and those accuracy issues and the ball fluttering and whatnot. I don't know if he ever turns into, because I think the comparison right now is Jalen Hurts, and Jim Nagy talked about, he said Milroe's, further along in his development than Hurts even was coming out. But Hurts was like a physical specimen with large hands, and always accuracy was never the case with Hurts. Like, you didn't question that. It was just arm talent, ability within structure.
Correct.
Milroe,
processing part.
Yes. So Milroe has the arm talent. There's no question about that. But I'd almost rather, for a quarterback who's that big of a run threat, I'd almost rather just be accurate, right? I don't necessarily need to have God tier arm talent to be effective at the NFL level. I just want him to hit the layups. And unfortunately, too many missed layups on his tape and throughout the week.